This interview is brought to you by Academic Technology Services.
Dr. Noelle Marie Spina is a board-certified clinical specialist in pediatric physical therapy. She's a senior clinician at Children's Hospital of Orange County, caring for preterm and term infants with medical complexities in their young lives, as well as young children diagnosed with cancer. She finds time somehow to also work at California State University, Long Beach. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
So at Cal State Long Beach, should I call you Dr. Marie Spina or Dr. Spina?
I'll tell you what, why don't we go with Noelle? Thank you so much for asking, though.
Absolutely. So Noelle teaches the pediatric curriculum, and she also organizes and facilitates integrated clinical experiences and service learning projects. And she also supports clinical midterm site visits.
That is correct. Makes me sound very busy.
Right. How do you find time for everything?
Well, do you know, it's always a choice. And when you get the privilege of doing what you love, being fully ingrained into it seems less like work each day that goes by. It definitely keeps you busy, though.
Yes. So thank you very much for speaking with us today. We're going to talk about your experiences with the mobile learning glass.
Okay.
First, I think it's a good idea for our listeners to get to know you a little bit.
Okay.
So what led you into teaching? And was teaching the first thing you did in your long career?
Well, actually, no. I went to school with the intent and focus of becoming a physical therapist. And within the profession of physical therapy, we are constant teachers, whether we're instructing our families in ways that they can care for their infants, whether we're instructing our clients in things that they can do to care for themselves, whether we're instructing physicians and the medical team on who we are and what we do. So education and client instruction is a key component of what we do as a profession. So I think I started my teaching on a slippery slope by just being a clinician, and from there, as a clinician teaching younger clinicians, or acting as a clinical instructor. And then from there, stepping into continuing education courses where I was taking some of my clinical expertise and being able to teach to other clinicians. I'm an alum of Cal State Long Beach. So when the opportunity came about to return back to where I graduated from and give back to the program from where I graduated, I very cautiously and hesitantly jumped in, and it's been a slippery slope ever since. So I've been now teaching in the department for a number of years, focusing on the pediatric curriculum because that's where my specialty lies.
What leads you to teach, how you teach, and why you teach?
Well, I'll tell you, Roger, I'm a big believer in building community. I was born and raised in Long Beach. I went to school in Long Beach. I treat children and young families who live in the greater Long Beach area. So I am a firm believer in building community, not only within where I live, but between all the members where I'm gracious and lucky enough to have different lives intersect at different times. So when you say, how did you wind up teaching, or what's your driving force behind teaching, I would say it's probably the same driving force that I use clinically and that I use in my personal life, and that is to continue to build the resources around me to make where we live a rich environment for everyone that I'm able to interface with. The way that I teach really has an awful lot to do with the way that I treat, and it starts from a place of validation and respect. And I think being a clinician and being able to see your clients and interface and have their gift of trust makes me a better teacher because I'm able to bring that into the classroom. And being in the classroom and having to redefine what I do clinically in a step-by-step methodical process, being an instructor makes me a better clinician. So my worlds intersect quite a bit, both in passion, in intensity, and in style.
So touching on something you just mentioned, being able to connect with people who you're treating or their families and your students, it must be different doing that virtually. And so I'm wondering if you could talk to us about what you have found challenging and how you've dealt with that in this new environment.
Um, well,
I wish I could say I embraced it. But I think I was like everybody else, and I was incredibly frustrated by it and potentially raged against it, because so much of what we do, both in the clinic and in the classroom, has a personable approach. There is a piece of humanity that's missing, and that ability to connect and relate to whether it's your client or your student on a individualized basis is missing. So in both of my worlds, when this happened, we had to find a way to continue, for lack of a better word, to play the game, right? To continue to get the job done and somehow reinvent how it's done so that we don't miss out on or lose the personal connection that drives us all together. So to say that it was an easy transition would be just nothing short of a blatant lie. To say I was unbelievably positive and jumped in the whole time full force, I wish I was that gracious, but I struggled with it. And I think I still struggle with it, but you have a choice, don't you? Do you know, you have a choice. And even when you're in the doghouse, you have the choice which way to face. And I choose to always face out the door and reinvent how we do things and why we do things. And if at its core you stick to this concept of building community with those around you, for those around you, not only for the present but in the future, then it's easier to find and navigate your way through the mayhem and madness out to just a moment of sunshine, yeah?
That's very clear. So let's get into the mobile learning glass.
Okay.
When did you decide to try this out?
Well, it certainly didn't start waking up thinking, let's try a mobile learning glass. This whole transition to an online platform was forced discovery, I would call it, yeah? And when this semester came about, I knew that what I had done in the past needed to be elevated. Right? It's one of my favorite words, right? Use the community around you, learn from them, and elevate your game. So when COVID first hit and we had to do an online transition, learning how to do a Camtasia voiceover, entertaining video was cutting edge technology for me. The next semester rolled around and that just wasn't quite enough. We had to drive that ability to interact and ability to connect. When I'm teaching graduate students about a profession that is foundationally housed in personable connections, I have to find a way to bring that to the classroom. So the next semester rolled around and we built more technology in with live Google Docs and breakout rooms and me reaching out to fellow clinicians in the community to share some of their insights via videos to try and push the engagement and levels of participation. And then when they announced, guess what? We're still not done this next semester. We're going online as well. After I picked myself up off of the floor, which was a few days of just hanging my head low in pure exhaustion, thinking there's just no way I can do this again. This just might be the final straw. God bless family, right? And God bless the support you build around you. And my husband sent me an email link for whatever reason I opened. Usually I don't, which now I'm on tape admitting in public. But he sent me a email link about innovative teaching techniques. And for whatever reason, I opened that link, and one of the first pictures was somebody behind a mobile learning glass or a learning glass. And I saw it, and I thought, I guess that's my one-up, because what I saw was the ability to engage, and what I saw was the ability to interact live, in person, in real time, with students that were then able to share their thoughts and share their ideas in real time and get the immediacy of feedback through discussion. But I had no freaking idea how to do it, how to go about it, where to begin, and I was exhausted. And so I had a little 24-hour come to Jesus moment where I thought, you put up or you shut up, basically, right? You either decide to be part of the solution or you remain part of the problem. And I knew what I couldn't withstand for another semester. I figured if I couldn't withstand it, probably my students couldn't either. So I jumped onto YouTube and I found a very clear do-it-yourself link on how to build a mobile learning glass, and showed it to my husband. I said, this is what I want to do. This is what we're going to do. And I'm going to nickel and dime and cheesy my way through this. And we did it real quick. And he took a look at it and said, I know you. You are going to break that in an instant. Concurrently, I found out that Cal State Long Beach had a mobile learning glass that I could actually borrow. So I reached out to that phenomenal team, Lane and Company, who were gracious enough to let me borrow it. And I looked at what they had. I compared it to this ridiculous do-it-yourself nickel and dime thing that I had built. And as a family, we collectively decided that we could move forward if we could figure out how to build it, gain some of the resources for it, and try it out. But I knew that this was going to be my way this semester to not only save my own soul insanity, but also one-up my game teaching in an online platform to really bring the classroom discussions to life. And then my husband, his brother, our neighbor, my nephew, my niece, two of my nieces, actually then helped me build a more permanent learning glass, and fine-tune it with multiple fails. I would Zoom my nieces and nephews, and they would very politely tell me, yeah, Auntie, that's so not working. Nice. A for effort, F on execution. And we just kept refining it. So we've gone from really high-end tech with support from the university to very low-end tech, including building a dark room in one of the corners of the house with dollar store black tablecloths as backdrops. We finagled our way through technology and learned how to get what we needed, and define what we needed, and then ran a ton of tests with it until we were able to then live stream reversed image, light board, active integrated discussions for students to review cases and make a shift in an online platform into something that actually you felt like you could connect with. And that's what I was after.
It sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is what I gathered from what you just said. You use the learning glass to teach with during synchronous sessions with your students, and they can actually respond to you in real time, and you can use the learning glass, which roughly is a whiteboard that people can see, to help illustrate what you are trying to convey.
That is more right than wrong. And there's just a couple pieces that I would just kind of shift for you a little bit. The mobile learning glass that I borrowed, that I was so fortunate enough to borrow from the university, that glass was smaller because people have traditionally been using it to record asynchronous content. What I was after was a bigger piece of glass with technology that would let me go synchronously with my students, and large enough that I could, like you said, accurately kind of diagram clinical reasoning processes and flows that we were able to construct with live discussions. So it's not necessarily a whiteboard. It's something that I can stand behind so they can still see me, just like you can see me on Zoom. And when I write on the board, the technology will invert the image so they can see in real time what I'm writing. And what I'm writing is feedback that I'm getting from them based on live discussions. So it allows for them to be more connected and a more integral part of the teaching process because we can collectively share, see, be seen, hear, be heard, right? And document what our case findings are with direct feedback on how to refine and elevate. And essentially what I tell them is we learn how to make a good answer better, and we learn how to make a better answer great.
So, what would you say is the advantage of your learning class over, let's say, I don't know if you've used the annotation tool in Zoom, where you can write on it with your mouse, or if you have a tablet, you can write on it with a stylus, and students can write on it as well.
The whiteboard one, correct?
Yes.
So I think number one, it's personal preference. So there's that thought. The second thought, or the second area I went to, and this is just me speaking personally, right? I think mask fatigue is real, and I say that as a clinician. And I think Zoom fatigue is real. This never-ending view of giant heads, right? Giant heads that are talking at you instead of people that are working together. So my preference, and the reason I shifted from shared Google Docs and a shared whiteboard via Zoom, is I wanted to bring a more direct, interactive experience that also had a different visual feel and a different audio feel, right? So that you don't have to shrink me down to see the light board. You can actually see me through it in real time, and I don't become a giant head on the side with a big screen on the other side of your computer.
Yeah, that's fascinating that you were able to see how useful it would be for your students and you to be able to use Learning Glass in this way. Going back to your experience with the mobile learning class, what would you say are the pros and cons?
Here's my thought on the mobile learning glass. It is probably the most phenomenal piece of equipment that I've ever been able to borrow, that from start to finish is so cherry. Everything works. There are step-by-step instructions on how to use it. The technology behind it, the build behind it, I could not have touched on my own. The only reason that I built what I built was because, number one, the mobile learning glass was designed smaller for use with recording for asynchronous content. And because it's a loaner, you have to give it back, right? Because it's so amazing, everybody wants it. I needed something that I could keep. Therefore, I had to build my own. And number two, when I shifted from asynchronous to synchronous content, I needed a bigger platform. If I didn't want to go synchronous, there's no reason for me to have built one. I would have used this phenomenal piece of equipment that those guys built. And it is packaged perfectly for transport. The check-in and check-out process is easy. These guys are intelligent. They know everything about it. And it was the platform that let me build what I build. Had I not seen it and used it, I would not have been able to build what I built to work so well. It is hands down a beautiful piece of equipment that's designed from start to finish for anyone of any level of tech to be able to access it and use it successfully. Because I had no experience teaching with it, I really had to rely on feedback that I got from my students, feedback that I got from my nieces and nephews who I tested it out with, who could tell me, do you know, your writing is too small. I can't see the colors. The light's reflecting off. You're moving too fast. You're moving too slow. You're not looking at us. It's important that you look at us. So there was a very steep and mandatory learning curve versus pros and cons. Does that make sense? If you asked my family what's the con, they would say, well, it's taken over the entire house because I'm not going to set it up and tear it down every day. So we have the entire house is destroyed. Not so much, again, that's a con. It's just a reality. But the flip side is, it lets me be spontaneous. It lets me take a student's insights or emerging clinicians' insights and thoughts, and in the immediacy of that moment, help them shift and learn and gain insight and elevate their reasoning in real time with a personal connection, right? If you go back to where I started, and that is, I am freakishly passionate about building community, and my profession thrives in communication and personal touch. When COVID hit, that left, that was gone. The learning glass lets me reach out and almost touch you. It lets me be a part of your space. It lets you enter a community that's sharing ideas. And I can say, well, what do you think? Why do you think that? Let's shift this. Let's change this. And it brings you back to community. It lets me be the type of clinician and the type of instructor that I can learn from. And I get feedback from my students, from my family who are lovingly brutal about what works and what doesn't, and find a way to not only teach, right, but connect.
I can I can almost visualize kind of how Learning Glass helps in a small way, in its own way. You do that.
My students are so intelligent and so passionate and so dedicated, right, that at a minimum, I have to bring that back to them, right? They work so hard to get into the program. The program is a graduate level demanding program with a foundation in interpersonal communication and professionalism. We have a core set of values that we as a profession have to abide by. It starts with accountability, runs through excellence, ends in professional duty.
What would you say to a faculty member who has just decided that they're going to try out the mobile learning glass?
I would say know that it's going to be worth every headache that you put in. And so I would say definitely jump in with both feet. But I would temper it with a toast of reality. Was it easy? Not by any means. Do you know, I had to scratch and claw and figure it out myself. So if they want to try it, I would say, boy, ask somebody smarter than me on how to go about doing it and use the resources, whatever resources you have, to help you get there. But whatever form of technology you're willing to take a look at and on board, right? Number one, it's a choice. Number two, it's a change, which means it's going to be tricky and difficult. So manage that within it and know there's going to be glitches. Know you're going to mess it up, right? Know you're going to get slayed a little bit with it. But if at the end point it helps you enter the classroom in a positive headspace, then that's going to help all your students enter the classroom in a positive headspace.
What would be your advice for the mobile learning glass that somebody could check out from ATS?
Okay, I will say this about ATS, rock stars. Lane and Lane's team were fantastic. They had no clue what I was trying to get done. They just kept going step by step with me. And so if your first step into trying use of a learning glass, the first thing I would do is email Lane and those guys and say, hey, can I just borrow it? Can you walk me through it? Can you show it to me? I have no clue what this crazy woman's talking about. So if you want to try it out, email Lane, borrow the learning glass. You can try it out in an asynchronous recording format, and they just have it dialed in fantastic. So I guess if you say, what's your advice, I would stick with that, regardless of what piece of technology you want to explore that resonates with you as an instructor, that resonates with your students, whatever that piece of tech is, right? Become proficient at it, and also make sure that managing that tech through the course of your class doesn't interfere with your teaching, because really that's what you're trying to get done. It's just another tool. The learning glass was a tool I chose based on my personal needs, my commitment to active engagement, my drive for participation, connection, and community, and this is what resonated with me.
It's been wonderful to hear your teaching philosophy and how important both sides of your career are to you and your students, and how you feed off of each other's energy. But I just also want to personally thank you for spending the time with us.
Well, I want to say thank you as well to you guys for taking the time to put something like this out there, because as a part-time faculty member, as a full-time faculty member, as any faculty, as any person on planet Earth, right? We're all struggling with different components of how our current situation has impacted us. Yeah. So you guys making a choice to try and share information and move it forward is the same choice I made in terms of trying to build community. I can't do what I'm doing without my department and the amazing people in my department not knowing what I'm doing, but always backing me on it. Yeah, that matters. Being able to pull in resources, whether it's CHHS Tech or ATS Tech, and say, you know more than me. Can you help me? There's no way that I could have pulled this off without the support of my family, friends, my department, the tech team at Cal State Long Beach, and my students, right? And their consistent input. So I think it kind of brings us back to where I started, and that's the importance of building community, knowing that when you're down on the ground and you need help, to ask for it, because it's hard. It's hard, but all it is a massive inconvenience. It's not really a problem. And I was fortunate enough to have support of people I love, people I work with, people I don't know, and people that I teach with and for say, all right, I'll buy what you're selling. Let's see where it takes us. So thank you to you guys as well. Absolutely, for putting this out there.
This interview is brought to you by Academic Technology Services.